So that was it? This is how this whole thing ended?
No!
840 days of a title reign, 2 months off the longest all-time at heavyweight, 217 days since his only title defense against Stipe Miocic that we just had to have happen no matter what for some reason. Disappointed! 588 days into Tom Aspinall's forced interim championship reign when he should have been the first and only person to fight Jon Jones after winning the heavyweight title. And it ends with Dana just casually throwing it out there in passing halfway through his post-fight press conference for Fight Night Baku because a local reporter asked him about it.
Well, I'd never even heard of this place until we did the deal here. Jon Jones called us last night and retired. Jon Jones is officially retired. Tom Aspinall is the heavyweight champion of the UFC.
Now I want to know what would have happened if nobody asked him at all about this. How do you not lead with the greatest combat sports athlete in history has retired and a UFC championship has changed hands? Why was there not a separate press conference for this altogether? Oh, is it because this whole situation has been an absolute disaster? Or do you just not care at all anymore?
Do you have any sense at all?
Okay. And then a couple hours later, we get a generic tweet from Johnny Meat that has the suspicious use of an M- in it, a mark that literally nobody has used casually in decades, but suddenly pops up all the time when AI that uses it constantly got popular. I'm accusing John of writing his farewell to the sport using ChatGPT, if that wasn't clear enough already.
He is a liar.
Which actually perfectly encapsulates how meaningless and hollow all of this was. I'm Angry from MMA On Point, and this is the most disgraceful champion retirement in UFC history. Jon Jones could not have gone out in any worse a way than he did. Losing the title would have been infinitely more impactful and meaningful to the sport if that were the final outcome. He didn't even have a final fight. I mean, obviously everybody has a final fight. Whatever their last fight is their last fight. And it was against Stipe Miocic. But the 200 plus days that happened after that, where Jon was still considered an active fighter with everybody begging the UFC to either make him fight the interim champion or be stripped as he rode around on the back of scooters in Thailand, takes away from the meaning of that fight as his final bout, even though it still would have been massively disappointing if he'd showed up that week and said, yep, this is it, so soak it all in. Because by that point, it was already apparent that this Miocic fight was a meaningless vanity bout, but even that would have been a hell of a lot better of an ending than this. Pulling a GSP and retiring after he beat Gon would have probably been his best option, since he clearly never had any intention of actually engaging with the heavyweight division in any meaningful way. It still would have kind of sucked, but the backlash against GSP wasn't too steep, mainly because he paired it with chronic illness.
What did you have? You had colitis?
Yeah, colitis, yeah.
What is that?
You know, I couldn't sleep. I had crazy cramps, you know, sometimes, and I had blood. Even like when I went to the bathroom.
Not that fighting Gon even to win that title was ideal either, considering it should have been Francis Ngannou he fought in the first place. Now that it's over and we know everything, how does this championship reign feel anything but hollow all the way through? Ngannou was the fight, the man, the lineal champion of the whole damn sport, and the UFC could not and would not ensure that we got the most meaningful possible fight at heavyweight in an incredibly long time when Jon Jones finally moved up. Cyril Gane is not likely going to be a Hall of Famer. He's Gabriel Gonzaga. He's Shane Carwin, Pedro Hizzo. Even if he wins the heavyweight title eventually, this division is at such a low point right now that it would feel like a Tim Sylvia reign. Now, it's not entirely Jon's fault that he fought Gane for the title instead of Ngannou. He had a price and the UFC refused to pay it.
I'll quote him and what he had said to my lawyer. Told my lawyer he wants what Deontay Wilder was paid. I think it was $30 million.
But he had literally 840 days to rectify that issue, to lay a rightful claim to that title by beating the next best guy, and he did literally anything he could do but that. And that is another massive issue with this reign, because without Ngannou, it is not entirely clear who is the best heavyweight in this division. That was entirely up for grabs and needed to be more established than simply winning the vacant title against Contender of the Week. I mean, lest we not forget, Gane got his second chance at heavyweight gold after beating Tai Tuivasa. Francis didn't lose the title. He left in his prime. The number 2 was not even clear at that point, but because Jon is who he is, of course, he would be given an immediate chance at the vacant title, and that's entirely justifiable. Nothing wrong with that. But it didn't change the fact that the best heavyweight wasn't competing in the UFC. Jones beat Gane, so had Ngannou. If Jon was to better establish himself in that division, he needed someone to step up and look like the next real threat, the next Ngannou. It looked like Sergey Pavlovich Pavlovich might be that next guy for a moment, but Tom Aspinall beat him and took that spot, became that clear contender, and then we just never got a resolution. The story of Jon's title reign actually ends right there, we just didn't know it yet. Everything after Aspinall becomes interim champion was ultimately pointless. Stipe Miocic wasn't even actively in the division. He was nearly 4 years removed. That Jones wanted to fight him and nobody else says everything about what he was really doing at heavyweight, which was nothing but creating an arbitrary legacy booster that ultimately had the opposite effect because of how much of an absolute disaster this has all been since then. Take the undisputed title out of the picture. Look at Jon's heavyweight reign and Aspinall's interim heavyweight reign side by side. Both have 2 fights, Gon and 42-year-old Stipe, Pavlovich, and Blades. There's an incredibly strong argument that Tom Aspinall's interim reign was stronger than Jon's actual reign, and yet despite this, there was never any serious effort on Jon's part, or the UFC's for that matter, to resolve this issue. And they did it to themselves. Don't make Aspinall the interim champion if you don't want fans for 600 days asking you why Jon Jones, the heavyweight champion, is not fighting the interim champion. It's your own system that you created, and the only reason you made that belt is because you needed a main event for that New York card. And that short-sightedness is something that constantly makes this promotion look ridiculous. According to Ariel Helwani, Jon Jones asked for a really big number to fight Aspinall at some point in this process, much like he did when he was negotiating for that fight with Francis Ngannou before he entered the heavyweight division.
If I give him the opportunity to fight me, I want to be so compensated. I want to say it, I want that fuck you money, honestly.
The UFC came correct with the money. Jon asked for top dollar, they offered him top dollar. Jon Jones was offered the deal, I said it, he finally accepted. The problem is he went back on his word.
Dana has since also confirmed a version of this story.
Jon Jones agreed to do the fight, so Jon Jones was offered the deal and accepted the deal. The fight was done. We had the fight done. Why he decided not to fight, you guys will have to ask him that.
Jon didn't want to do it. And Dana's confusion about the situation after UFC 316 now makes sense, because according to him, he thought that was all good to go. It just hadn't been figured into the schedule yet. That Jon was given the amount he asked for and still decided on not doing the fight is a devastating admission, because many of us were under the impression that Jones saw the Aspinall fight as worth the high risk if the money were right. But since the UFC is notoriously stingy with their cash, that would be the ultimate roadblock for this fight happening. I know that was the reason I had always assumed the fight wouldn't go down. So to hear that from a reliable source like Ariel, and to have Dana now kind of confirming that, is pretty shocking and damning for Jon Jones, especially in the context of his negotiations with the Francis Ngannou fight. Was he avoiding that bout in the same way he avoided Aspinall, by asking for money he didn't think the UFC would ever give him?
He wants what Deontay Wilder was paid. I think it was $30 million.
I'm speculating at this point, of course, but the fact it happened with this Aspinall fight lends to the idea that maybe it's possible that is true. And this is also an indictment on this current version of the UFC. You run Ngannou out of town so we lose our heavyweight champion. Before he goes, you can't get that fight with Jones done. When Jon finally does come around, you decide it's hell or high water Jones versus Miocic, one of the most unpopular bookings I have seen in a very long time, nearly universally disliked. When it got canceled for Jon's injury, you doubled down and insisted that it happened once he was good to go, despite hastily making a Tom Aspinall interim championship because you needed to fill a card. And then the entire division just sat in limbo. It was already there because nothing after Jones beat Gon had made any sense, but what happened after that? Zero pressure on the champion to defend his title. In the past, the UFC would absolutely shred champions that sat on the shelf. If you weren't active, they would make you active.
You owe it to the fans, you owe it to that belt, you owe it to this company, and you owe it to Johnny Hendricks to give him that opportunity to fight again.
Listen, Tyron Woodley and I have a good relationship, but that's one of the big problems with Tyron Woodley. When you're a fighter and you're ranked in the top 10 or the top 5, you fight whoever's available and whoever's ready to fight. If you believe that you're the best in the world, you should fight anybody. You should fight all comers.
Valentina Shevchenko yesterday predicted this was going to happen. She keeps talking about how she doesn't think Nico Montano wants to fight her.
Well, yeah, what happens now is the title becomes vacant. This is pretty much a place where if you don't fight, You know what happens when you don't fight.
And I'm not saying that's the right approach either necessarily, but for the division to be in the position that it was in, which was drowning and essentially championless, what needed to happen was the immediate resolution of this situation. And it is a testament to how things are going these days that Dana seemingly didn't even know that Jones was talking about retirement on social media, talking about not caring if he was getting stripped. He thought the fight was in their back pocket already. We'll get to it when we get to it.
He said he's ready to vacate the belt.
He said he doesn't care if you strip it, but he would vacate it.
I've been busy. I haven't been keeping up with the gossip.
And the way they handled this transition, a passing mention during a fight night presser because somebody happened to ask about it, nothing could say more about how little the UFC cares about this situation than that, or makes Aspinall's championship status feel any less important. It is fantastic that the man is finally getting his undisputed title, but it comes at a heavy price. Years of his prime wasted. This version of the UFC is more comfortable, and Dana is being pulled in more directions that have nothing to do with MMA than we have ever seen, and it is starting to show quite a bit. This new publicly traded corporate era of the promotion feels like it's on autopilot. The passion is just zero. And the conclusion to this whole mess of a situation is just another example of how uninterested the promotion seems in promoting. They have no problem getting in a spat with Francis Ngannou again though, of course. If there was ever a chance to bring the lineal title back to the UFC, to see a truly significant heavyweight bout between Francis and Tom, that is going right out the window.
I'm not a big fan. I would be shocked if Francis ever came back here.
How can they look at the state of this heavyweight division and think that they're too good for Francis? How?
Now Aspinall will reign over a hollow heavyweight division that's been dead for the better part of 840 days. And I think a big part of that is that the UFC is failure-proof to the point now where they don't have to pursue anything that they don't want to. And they don't even see the benefit of making a fight like Ngannou versus Aspinall for the integrity of the sport. And I think that says a whole lot too. The reason Dana so badly wanted Fedor was because everyone considered him the best. Well, the best is out there right now, and they do not care. But as much as this was the UFC's fault, knowing now that Jon simply refused to do the fight and that no other barrier was truly in place for it, what does this mean for the legacy of Jon Jones? There's been so much talk about it since the retirement announcement. Is his legacy destroyed? Well, there's no doubt his legacy is more tarnished than it was coming up to heavyweight. He already had enough legal troubles, enough PED failures, but now he has the most explicit case of not dodging one, but now two of the heavyweight champions. The longest inactive run ever, more legal troubles. I hate you. He's pissed off even his most ardent supporter. Look, there is no erasing his dominance on top going all the way back to 2011 when he won his first world title. But without a doubt, he has enraged more people than any exiting champion in MMA history. And so this was the only way that Jon was ever going to go out. I mean, how fitting that Susie Cusey would break a story about another Jon Jones hit and run incident the day before his retirement. There was never going to be a grand exit for Jon Jones. It was always going to be a disappointing whimper in the wind, an unsatisfying last bite of burnt toast. Jon Jones is the greatest disaster this sport has ever had, and it's only fitting that his retirement be the most disgraceful. Whew, thank you, I had to get that off my chest. A massive shout out and thanks to our channel members. If you want to become one yourself, want exclusive content, hit the join button, like and subscribe for more rants from me when I'm occasionally angry. Leave a comment about what you think of Jon Jones' legacy, and thank you so much for watching. Have a fantastic day, everybody.